I remember watching The Exorcist as a kid and being completely terrified, scarred for life.
More than half of all Americans believe in possession by a spirit or the devil.
Demonic possession is a staple of the horror franchise.
Stories of possession have been told since humanity has learned to communicate.
Spirits, demons, gods.
The devil maybe do it, right?
Could demonic possession really be real? And if so, how at risk are we?
You just have to ask, could there be any truth here? There has to be some truth in all of this.
On December 26, 1973, the film adaptation of William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist hit movie screens, becoming one of the best-known horror movies ever produced.
The Exorcist has become one of the most profitable horror movies ever made. And it was good. There were reports of people vomiting in the theatre, people passing out, supposedly. People even had heart attacks. People had never seen anything like this before. Yes, horror movies were gaining in popularity, but nothing like this film. And it scared the hell out of everyone. It still scares the hell out of people. The Exorcist is still on the most popular horror movie charts. And it's been over 50 years.
Theaters and theater bathrooms constantly smell like vomit, and some also say feces. It just lingered.
People were running for the toilets and getting sick. A lot of people missed the toilets completely or just got sick right in the theater seat. The Exorcist movie was completely unexpected and new, but the theme of the film was a very old one. These themes in Blatty's book and subsequently film are as old as time itself. Good versus evil, light versus dark, God versus the devil, classic themes. And the film itself was incredibly graphic for the time. Great makeup, a good use of the now classic jump scare, a pea soup gag, spinning heads. You know, this film had all the bells and whistles and still holds up to this day when you watch it. People still get scared watching The Exorcist. It's still a great horror movie. If you love horror films and the horror genre itself, you probably watched The Exorcist more than one time for sure. You probably own a copy or two.
When you start adding up what The Exorcist did for the horror genre, you see the scale of the movie's influence. It also began the trend of the Catholic Church being portrayed as the savior of children. In movies, the church became God's private SWAT team. There's a possessed kid. Quick, call the church.
Even though they definitely didn't support the film, the Catholic Church, no doubt, secretly loved what The Exorcist was doing for their image. They were shown in a very favorable light, and they needed that contrary to what church officials say. The Exorcist was a godsend, pun intended.
But just what is it that makes The Exorcist so scary? Is it the look of the film or the pacing? On an emotional level, what is it that makes the story itself so fundamentally disturbing? The perfect complement to the thrills and chills of an excellent horror film. Many believe it's the very thought of losing control, of being possessed.
The thought of being possessed by some external force is horrific even to consider. It's a total loss of control of your own body. Think about that. It's a complete corruption of what it means to be human. No more free will. You are literally like a puppet for someone or something else. You have no control over your own body and perhaps even your own mind. and yet you will still be held accountable by the majority of people. If you don't think that's true horror, true terror, I don't know how else to convince you. Having no control of my own body and being forced to do things I don't want to do, maybe horrible things, thematically, is one of the scariest things I can think of.
Possession isn't just a religion-based theme, but for a lot of people, religion is the first thing that comes to mind. That's because of Western media. But even for supposedly proven, documented cases, why does it have to be possession? Why does it have to be the devil or a demon? Especially when it comes to older documented cases of possession. Cases from, say, 100 years ago would probably not be called possession today. They would fall under the mental disorder banner, and people would be hospitalized, not just shipped off to a church for an exorcism.
Could those believing that they are possessed by an evil force and forced to do things they don't want to do simply be the unwilling victims of a medical breakdown or mental disease? Could conditions such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder scientifically explain the vast majority of possession cases? Perhaps further clues can be found by going back and looking at some of the first official guidelines used for determining and fighting off demonic possession. The Vatican, January 1999. The Catholic Church finally decides to revise the rite of exorcism, which had remained the same for over 300 years. The Church has always authorized the use of exorcism for the victims of demonic possession, if the possession is proven.
The possession has to be proven to be a real possession, not just some kind of crazy person thinking they're possessed.
Contrary to popular belief, an exorcism does not rely on the rigid use of an unchanging formula or on the ordered sequence of prescribed actions.
An exorcism relies on a few different things. First, it relies on authority. Not anyone can perform an exorcism. You need to be backed by the church. An exorcist operates on the authority of the church. You need that authority. The priest also needs to have faith, 100% faith. They need to know that they are working for the church who back them all the way until the bitter end. Without those two things, an exorcism can't work. Without those two key things, what would be the point? You need the authority given to you, and you need to know it will work.
In modern exorcisms, the ritual assumes that the possessed person retain their free will, though the demon may hold control over their physical body.
A person can be exorcised only by an ordained priest with the express permission of the local bishop, but only after a careful medical examination to exclude the possibility of mental illness.
We can't have an exorcist trying to purge the body of someone who isn't actually possessed. It's not good for the church when that happens. So this is why they try and prevent such mistakes from taking place in the first place. It's also why the church doesn't allow a lot of exorcisms to take place at all. They consider them very dangerous at the best of times. Nobody wants another disaster, such as what happened in Salem.
Although not a new practice for anyone hailing from Europe, the Salem witch trials in 1693 have become famous for their brutality and seemingly pointless and cruel nature.
The accusations in Salem began in 1692 when two young girls came down with a mysterious illness. They got a doctor who couldn't figure out what's wrong with them. He decided to say it. It was witchcraft. I mean, that sounds crazy, but that's what doctors did back then. If they didn't know what it was witchcraft. It's hard for us to understand how real the devil and witches were to religious people back then. It sounds so dumb now. But that's how it was back then. Possession, devils, and witches.
Things just got out of control after that. Everyone was a witch. Every time someone was accused, it broadened the scope of what was considered supernatural. More people would fall into the accepted category of possibly being a witch. I'm sure lots of people accused others simply because they didn't like them. And that's fear doing its thing in a superstitious time.
There are many who believe that William Stoughton, who was ultimately in charge of the Salem witch trials, was himself actually possessed by a demon. Stoughton was known as a believer in spectral evidence. And there are those who say he was routinely investigated by the church for his often demonic feeling actions and behavior.
This is just more proof that the idea of possession has always been there. Evil spirits taking over everyone has always been whispered about. Especially back then, if you were weird, you were possessed. Today, most people know better. If you say you're possessed, most people just think you're nuts. That you're either looking for some kind of attention, or that you're sick in the head and need help. And they're probably right.
Around the world, there have been thousands of reported demonic possessions. For possession researchers, the sheer amount of cases is proof of demonic possession. The similarities of cases spanning thousands of years is also the smoking gun so many believers point out. The Vatican has formally recognized some 400 members authorized to address cases of possible possession. And the rules they have to follow are many. But some self-proclaimed exorcists, and even some official clergy, are not so cautious. On July 1st, 1976, Annalise Michel died of undernourishment after several months of a home exorcism.
At the time of her death, she weighed just 70 pounds and was barely able to move or speak. This exorcism went on for months and months. Can you imagine how much she suffered?
The two Roman Catholic priests were charged with negligent homicide in the case of Annalise. The 23-year-old woman's parents, Joseph and Anna Michel, were also indicted on the same charge. The priests, Ernst Alt and Wilhelm Renz, said they conducted the exorcism rites in a church-approved attempt to free Miss Michel of demons. Cases such as Annalise Michel's are not unique. In 2012, a priest was summoned to court to answer questions about more than a dozen exorcisms he carried out on a teenage girl with anorexia.
The defense argued that exorcisms are a religious practice, maintained as a part of the church's tradition, and a rite available to all of the faithful. The exorcist at the center of the case, it added, had been legitimately appointed by a bishop. No wrongdoing had taken place. The woman was in need of help. The church tried to provide it.
There's also the exorcism death of 19-year-old Zepeda. The boy's parents and their friend were charged with murder when he died tied to a chair. They were trying to exorcise the evil spirits, but they were found guilty.
It's important to note that exorcisms are not solely the domain of the church. In fact, most religions feature one form of demonic possession or another. The rituals and practices of various methods of spiritual expulsion are remarkably similar across all cultures, with authority and belief remaining the key components when freeing the soul.
Haitian spiritual practitioners or African American root doctors are usually the people performing an exorcism. Traditions are important, and the person performing the exorcism must be aligned with light. A traditional root doctor uses herbs and potions, as well as physical actions in their exorcism. This is mirrored by the church using a cross or a Bible. The physical elements are meant to hurt the invading spirit. That includes slightly poisoning the host body in order to torture the demon in control.
The term exorcism can be appropriately used to describe rituals from many global traditions. If it is defined as a practice that aims to free a person, place, or object from a negative spiritual influence.
Any legal framework that respects democratic and human rights supports freedom of belief and cultural diversity. But it must also protect those not fully able to advocate for themselves. If a person is unable to speak for themselves or make decisions for themselves, religious belief or not doesn't really matter. It shouldn't really matter if a person cannot make decisions. Their religious leader shouldn't be able to make life-altering decisions for them.
Some cultures see possession as an unlucky accident that can happen to anyone. Others say people bring it onto themselves through bad behavior, or by playing around with things they should have been playing with.
There have been exorcism-related deaths caused by salt poisoning, dry drowning from water, and even fatal doses of intravenous drugs. Taking all that into account, telling people that an exorcism is a positive and universal practice to save a soul is pretty dangerous and also pretty incompetent if done by an official. Even when the dangers of exorcisms are mentioned, they're usually presented as only a little dangerous. And then you have legal and public service people like police officers. They may either leave people alone, citing religious rights as a reason not to intervene, or the complete opposite. They will interfere with a generally safe practice because they just don't understand how it works.
These kinds of mistakes and misunderstandings of religious rites and cultural differences have at times contributed to preventable exorcism-related deaths, including those of children. In the film The Exorcist, Believer, the treatment of exorcism as a simple and benign phenomenon, spanning cultural and religious divides, isn't accurate at all, or even desirable, even in the context of a horror film. There is a book by journalist Matt Baglio called The Rite, The Making of a Modern Exorcist, which inspired the 2011 film The Rite. In modern times, many books have been published by members of the clergy and by psychiatrists. Many of these stories have inspired movies that take liberties with the rules and rites involved in exorcisms.
Father Gabriel Amoff was the chief exorcist of the Vatican from 1986 until he died in 2016. The books he's written about exorcisms have been the inspirations of many movies and have been themselves made into full movies. The Pope's Exorcist is a good one, I like that, based on Father Gabriel's writings. Good job at Russell Crowe. But just how accurate is it? Honestly, not really accurate at all. Things have been beefed up considerably, and Amorth himself has said most exorcisms are pretty boring. Keyword, most of them. And I would like to get access to a few that aren't considered boring. But here's the thing. I suspect those few exceptions aren't as easily obtainable by the general public.
You have to consider the blatant misuse of religion, the church, and even exorcism. In 2008, the Catholic Church in Poland established a center of exorcism. Their role was created partially to fight the demons of homosexuality. And some priests were disqualified from performing exorcism, but the damage was already done.
Exorcising the gay out of someone? How backwards does that sound, especially in this day and age? But it happens. It is happening. A trend has begun. Using exorcism as a tool for political views, the popularity of movies involving possession is being used for political agendas and cultural fears.
Everything is getting crazy out there, more and more every day.
Each year, more and more people are coming forward, claiming to be possessed, or that someone they love has been infested by a demonic force, intent on inflicting harm. In general, people considered to be possessed are not regarded as evil themselves and are not responsible for their own actions. But many believe that possession is just an excuse for bad behavior or a sign of severe mental illness. Could all of these opinions be possible? Many believe the answer is an easy yes. They believe that while many claim possession as an excuse, there are definitely real cases of true and genuine demonic possession. Most people would choose to never find out for sure, because a definitive answer would not only be scary, but could also crack the already fragile facade of religions in general.